Good evening, everyone, and Zero family, Zero champions. It's so wonderful to have you joining us from all across the country for Zero's very first Caregiver Town Hall event. I'm Shelby Moneer, Zero's Vice President of Patient Programs and Education, and I will be serving as your host tonight. I am joined by three of our incredible and gracious caregivers who we are going to hear from in just a moment. We are really looking forward to a very interactive event with a great discussion. This town hall is being recorded and we're going to post it to our website, zerocancer.org. This will be posted in the next couple of days. And then at the end of the town hall, you're going to see a link to a survey. So we'd love for you to participate so we can get your feedback on this event and better serve you. You're also going to receive an email with a link to the recording of our town hall as well as the survey. So for those of you not already familiar with Zero, Zero is the leading national nonprofit with the mission to end prostate cancer. Zero advances research, improves the lives of men and families, and inspires action. We are building Generation Zero, the first generation of men free from prostate cancer. We do this through our National Run Walk series, through our education and support programs like our webinars and support groups, and all of our grassroots advocacy efforts. So if you are new to the Zero community, we welcome you. So just a little bit about our hour together. We're going to get to know our caregivers. Each of them will share their stories with you. We'll learn about their experiences and their unique journeys. And then we're going to dive into a few questions for each of them. So again, we want to make this as interactive as possible. Please send us your questions. You can type those into the Q&A box if you're joining us through Facebook. We'll also capture questions through Facebook. So please send those in to us. If you have any thoughts, comments, questions for our caregivers, we'll do our best to get to as many as we can in our hour together. So first, I want to get started with some introductions. As I told our amazing caregivers, you aren't here to listen to me talk, you're here to listen to our caregivers share their stories. So let's jump right in, and I'm going to give the floor to Kathy. Kathy, would you mind sharing a little bit about your prostate cancer caregiving journey?
Okay, our journey began in 2001. So as you can see, we're 20 years into this. It's been a long ride. And I would say that as my group, that I lead a support group, and as that group said today, you know, you can't control the waves, but you can learn how to surf. So I think I have spent 20 years learning how to surf better. And it's taken all kinds of shapes and forms. And our lives have changed drastically from the way they were 20 years ago, but so has the path for prostate cancer. So just seeing through the years, all the hope of the new treatments, the new scans, the new earlier diagnoses, that's been hopeful and helpful. And it's a way of life. It's a lifestyle we didn't choose, but we've learned to find something positive every day in what we do and how we approach it. And I'll talk more about that later.
Great. Thanks, Kathy. We look forward to hearing more. Megan, would you like to share your introduction with us?
Sure. My name is Megan Robertson. And back in April of 2017, my dad, Gene, was diagnosed with stage 4 prostate cancer with bone mets. It came out completely out of the blue. I knew no one that had prostate cancer. So getting a stage 4 diagnosis was quite scary. We kind of waded through all of the emotions. And then a few months later in September, I went to lunch with my dad and we walked past a community bulletin board and saw a Zero sign. And that's how we found Zero. It was 2 weeks before the walk event. So I went home that night and I signed up our team, Team El Jefe. My dad was a biology teacher for 35 years, and that's what his coworkers had called him, El Jefe. So we made Team El Jefe, and we just did our 4th walk. So that's how we found Zero.
Megan. Daphne, would you like to share your introduction, please?
Of course. My name is Daphne Brigham here in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. We found zero kind of a roundabout way. I'd lost my sister to metastatic cancer. In a year and about 3 days after her passing, I actually we found out that my husband had prostate cancer. So, like Megan, I knew people that had cancer before, but not prostate cancer. So I didn't know anything about it or where to start or anything. And then being a caregiver for my sister and now having to switch to something different, I literally just went to the internet, tried to find any group or anything that had to do with prostate cancer. And I happened to be in several different groups, and a young lady by the name of Keisha introduced me to, she invited me to a Fighting for Men's group, which is a group up in the New York area and led by zero cancer individuals, as well as an amazing young lady by the name of Renee. And I absolutely fell in love with her because she was very personable. She was willing to share because I was asking a ton of questions. And from that day forward, we have been 0-0 every single day. We do our own, little bitty things to raise awareness as well. So really that's how we found zero, because of Keisha and then through Renee.
Wonderful. Thanks, Daphne. Daphne, are you willing to share the type of cancer that your sister was diagnosed with?
They said it was called metastatic cancer. They couldn't figure out where it was coming from. She also was a teacher as well as my husband. The only thing they kept asking was, has she ever worked in a bar? Or does she smoke? And those things. So they couldn't really figure out where it was coming from. Long story short, I moved her in with me. She had a huge mass on her aorta. So she had stage 4 cancer. After the treatment, she was doing much better. And literally just wanted to go back and teach. And she got to go to her teacher in service for 2 days, got to see her students for 1 day after a year of treatment. So, of course, everything happens for a reason. We always think, why is this happening to me? But we're walking by faith and not by sight. So we still, of course, live our days every single day and continue to push forward.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for sharing, Daphne. So obviously with these amazing introductions and beginnings of each of our caregiver stories, it's no secret that serving in this role can be just unbelievably stressful. Caregivers feel the push and pull of providing care on your own time, on their own time. I'm sure financial well-being is at play, your own physical health and emotional health, your family and work. Caregivers are up against so many challenges, and not only can information and resources and benefits be difficult to find, sometimes they're too expensive to afford. So I just want to recognize all of the various challenges that exist. And I know that I haven't even gotten to all of them, or even probably a portion of them. And before we jump into our first questions, I also just want to recognize that we do have 3 females up here represented, and caregivers, though, come in all walks of life. I know that the gay population has some other challenges to consider, and we have all ages and races and genders and faiths that have different things to consider and different factors at play. So Zero is constantly working to provide resources for all people who are up against this prostate cancer diagnosis and are amazing caregivers. So I just wanted to recognize that before we jump in. So we also know that every journey is unique. We have some experiences that are similar, but no two are ever going to be exactly alike. So we're so excited to jump in and hear more about your experiences. So next, I was wondering if we could just jump right into each of you just sharing what's been the absolute most difficult challenge since your loved one's diagnosis, or maybe even a twist on that, something that you thought would be really challenging when you heard the words prostate cancer, and then you thought, oh, well, I did that. I got through that somehow, and it wasn't as difficult as I thought. So I don't really have a preference on who starts, but so I can call if that makes it easier. So Megan, would you like to share? Does that question resonate with you?
Sure. Something that I thought was going to be really hard was going to be talking about it. I thought that like, there's no way that I'm going to be able to talk about this without bawling my eyes out, or, you know, I thought there was no way. So what I did initially was I talked about it all the time. I talked about it with my friends. I talked about it with my family, my husband, my mom. So my parents have been married for 43 years. So I talked about it with my mom, and we talked about it all the time. And it kind of got me over that hump of, you know, like if I don't talk about it, then it's not real. So I talked about it enough that I got comfortable with it enough. And then when we found Zero, being able to share not just the scary moments, but being able to share the exciting things. Like every time, so my dad's stage 4, he goes out to the Cancer Treatment Centers of America in Chicago. So we're in central Pennsylvania. He flies to Chicago every 6 months. And when he comes back, I get to share the exciting news that his PSA is still undetectable. And I get to share all those kind of things with friends and family. And I get to go on Zero and tell them. And I think it's exciting to tell the Zero family, because I don't have to explain it to them. They know what that means. So I can go on and share that with them, and it really helps to talk about it.
Yeah, thanks, Megan. I have to say, on behalf of all of the Zero staff, we are thrilled that you share your highs and lows with us. We cherish all of our champions and community members, and we love connecting with people like you. So we're so glad and honored that you share that with us. I think you bring up such a great point in you didn't say the words storytelling, but sharing the story and talking about it. And there is a lot of research behind learning how to become a storyteller in the cancer journey, and some coping strategies. So thanks for that. Daphne, what about you?
I can relate to a lot of what she was saying, because I know with my sister, I felt like I was alone and I didn't really know where to turn. And coming to Zero and being able to have that family, like she said, talking to somebody that understood what you were going through made it so much easier. I don't really think that there was anything really difficult about being a caregiver, especially when you're caring for someone that you love, like you would do anything for them. I think if I had to put one huge thing on it, is I would like to take that pain away from them or take the worry away from them. And of course, we all know we can't do that, but that's the biggest thing. So with my husband in general, of course, he's your manly man. Oh, I'm fine, I'm fine, I'm fine. But I hear you at night when you don't feel well, or like right now, he's going through these amazing summers. Like he's always hot, he's sweating profusely, he can't stand it, and it's like, what can you do? So in my aspect, I'm freezing every night because, if it makes him feel better, I can be uncomfortable for a small period of time. So I think for me it would definitely be, if we could take some of that away from them, to make them a little bit more comfortable. But I 100% agree with Megan, having this community and this family to be able to talk to, whether it's one person or a group, just to be able to let it out. In my instance, I don't have my parents. I lost my sister, which was my best friend. So I don't have, that close-knit family to talk to. So Zero has become my family. I talk about Renee a lot. I know she's on staff, but I've talked to her, just on a personal level, although I still have Tracy here and I talk to her too, but I was just really drawn to her in order to be able to just let things out. So just, if I could say anything, it would probably be just being able to relieve them of some of that stress and worry.
Sure. Thanks, Daphne. Well, we think the world of both Tracy and Renee too, but it's always lovely to hear that. They are wonderful.
They're amazing ladies.
Yeah. Thanks, Daphne. Kathy, what about you? Would you share some of the challenges, or maybe something that you didn't expect that was a little bit easier?
So when this came upon us in 2001, I had just lost my father to terminal cancer. And so my thought that just overwhelmed me was, am I going to be a widow? Is this man also going to exit my life? And what would I do if that happened? I just, he was 64, I was 59. So it was a scary time. And I tend to be the emotional one in the couple. He's very even keeled, and he was actually in his career a cancer researcher and scientist. So he knew exactly about all this and had reasonable processes that he used to decide on treatment and to bring me on board to understand it better. But I also could read and find stuff out, and I would be scared at this little bit of information or that little bit of information. And then we started going to conferences because he knew about conferences. And actually, I didn't tell you how I found Zero. What year was Zero initiated? Because I want to say I met the first Zero person at a PCRI conference. So
yeah, I think that's probably accurate.
So PCRI is Prostate Cancer Research Institute. They're out in California. And we've gone to every conference I think that they've offered. The first one was the scary one for me because we were brand new in this, well, a couple of years into it maybe, but we'd had the surgery. And I say we because it's a couple's disease. His experience is my experience, not the same way, but side by side with him. So we've kind of co-equally shared all the decision-making and all the doctor's appointments and probably all the stress too. So that said, we found lots of resources, and we came actually through PCRI and through Us Too, another organization that my husband actually was closely associated with for quite a number of years. And we've appreciated their emphasis on the support group. And that's really how I got so closely linked with all that I've learned is, well, I'm an educator, so I want to learn stuff and I go for the informational side of things. But then I bring it home to the emotional side of me, and it has to make sense in my life. So it's been a long road, but it's also been one where I'm never alone and I have a lot of resources. And I guess if there'd be one thing that I would say I learned to do that I wouldn't have necessarily thought would be easy is ask for help. I think I was raised to take care of things and get them done and be good at it and efficient and not look needy. But I can tell you there's plenty of need in this world, and there are plenty of people whose gift it is to be a helper. So if I don't express my need, I deny you your opportunity to help me. So I'm going to continue trying to identify how I can reach out, who can become a part of the network, because it isn't about either or it's both and. Working together, we can all do better.
Yeah, absolutely, Kathy. Thank you. I think I'm so glad that you mentioned all of the all of the organizations that you have been a part of. I think it's so important that all of these patient advocacy organizations offer something different. We're not all out here doing the same things and having the same skill sets and areas of expertise. And the Us Too is an amazing organization. I think we can all agree. And Zero is just so proud to have merged with Us Too. And we now have all of these amazing support groups falling under the Zero umbrella. And Kathy, you're just such a prime example of how amazing the support group leaders are and the great work that you and all of our other support group leaders do. So I'm so glad you mentioned that. and I think just finding other people who are going through this experience and connecting with nonprofits and patient advocacy groups, it really just sets you up to feel supported and more empowered and educated. So I'm so glad that you mentioned that. It actually brings me to one of our questions from the audience that I'll jump into from someone listening in. She says, I'm an oncology nurse and have heard repeatedly over the years how difficult it is when the family caregiver and the patient have different coping styles. One wants to kind of minimize the worry and the symptoms, and the caregiver wants to, call the doctor and is maybe a little bit more alarmist. So if any of the three of you have had those experiences, we would love to hear what it's been like as you navigate those differences in maybe personality types and coping strategies.
I don't mind hopping in on that.
Thank you.
Because as I said, Dave's the scientist and he understands all the fancy language and he catches on to the drug names the first time around. And I go to conferences and I take copious notes and I come home and I try to make sense out of them. And so approaching things from, he's kind of calm about it and I'm kind of panicked about it. But I can tell you this, that I thank prostate cancer for improving our communication, because within the marriage, we talk about things and have talked about things from the get-go that might never have even come up or that I wouldn't have been bold enough to ask about. But when you get desperate, you get bold. And so I needed to know stuff. And when he understood it and I didn't, we just got right into the what's this and what does that mean and how does that apply to you? And it brought us closer together, truthfully.
I was thinking that was probably my husband's oncology nurse that was asking that question, because I think she was talking about me, because he's the calm person and I'm in the meetings with my recorder going. I got my notebook and I'm asking 52 million questions. He's like, it's okay, we'll find out later. I'm like, no, I need to know now. Like, I'm a flaming red. I don't know if anybody's ever taken a color code test that tells you what your personality is. I need to know now. I don't want to go around the merry-go bush. So for me, I feel that she was literally, like when you go to church and you think the preacher's talking to you, I think that question was 100% me. Because I definitely want to know. I don't want to wait. I think waiting gives me anxiety. I'm like Kathy as well. I'm taking notes. I need to go and research it. Google MD, everything. I need to know what this one says and that one says and everything in between, and then I'll sort it all out. So, but like she also said, Zero has kind of helped me tone that down a little bit, because then I can go over here and get some information from other individuals that are going through the same things. Like at the beginning, I was like, what's a PSA, all that. I didn't know what any of that meant. When I was on those groups that I was talking about, they were asking me, what's your husband's this and that? And I was like, I don't even know what that is. It's like, well, did you get this paper? So just learning those little bitty steps and maybe just taking just a small step back, still ask for the information, but maybe taking a small step back.
I think as a daughter versus a spouse, I come at it from a little bit of a different perspective. So my mom is very much, I need to know this, I need to know that. She's bringing the recorder, and I get that from her. But my dad is much more relaxed, much more like, it'll be fine, I'm fine. So we actually, as a family, came together, and he's allowed to take a caregiver with him every 6 months. So instead of it all falling on my mom, we've been taking turns. So like last March, I flew with him to Chicago, and I knew what mom would want to know. So I was kind of taking notes for her, but also kind of like not asking copious amounts of questions because I knew it would stress my dad out. So kind of like playing both sides. But, also asking, okay, so I know my mom would want to know, and asking the questions for her. So I get it from a little bit of both ends of that.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Thank you all. So, we know that when we're caregivers, and, just like there's no blanket treatment plan for our patients, and our loved ones, this is so unique, and you guys are each showing, all of that as it's shining through in your responses and comments. So really appreciate that. I wondered if there were maybe some pieces of information or, tips, anything that you just really wish you would have known right at the diagnosis that now that would have been really helpful to know, at the initial diagnosis or early on.
So for me, I definitely would have loved to have had more information about the prevalence of prostate cancer. Like I mentioned, I think I knew one person that at least was maybe open with their diagnosis. There are probably lots more in my life, and I had no idea. So when I think that I would have had a little bit of comfort knowing that it was kind of a prevalent thing in men my dad's age. And I also think that it would have kept me from feeling kind of dismissed when I told people, because I didn't know how prevalent it was. So when I would tell people like, oh, my dad was just diagnosed with prostate cancer, I got a lot of like, oh, my uncle had that, he was fine. Or like, oh, my dad had that, he had a prostate removed and everything's fine, he's fine. But there I sat where surgery was never an option for my dad. It's never been mentioned, and because he was already stage 4, and I felt dismissed, like it wasn't that big of a deal. Why was I making it that big of a deal? And I really think that if I would have known how prevalent it was, then I could have kind of measured my response, because it, quite frankly, it made me angry at people, because I felt like they weren't taking it seriously, and it was a big deal to me, and I needed it to be a big deal to them too. So I think having more information about the prevalence would have been really helpful.
Yeah, great point. Like, oh, I don't, you don't have the right kind of cancer for me to feel overly concerned for you. Yeah, absolutely. Great point, Megan. Thank you. Daphne?
A little bit of both for me as well. I know when my husband, as we sat there in the meeting and we were asking questions, and she's like, well, people live with prostate cancer for years, and we're kind of sort of sure, but we're not sure, and we need to do all these tests. And she's like, well, we can wait 6 more months or so, and then we can run another PSA or what have you, or we can fast track this and see what's going on. Well, of course, coming off the cuff of losing my sister, I'm like, I can't lose my husband, considering my sister's doctor was treating her for sciatic nerve for over a year before we found out she had cancer. So I was like, no, we need to fast track this. Long story short, the doctor that we ended up getting said that, well, before we can do anything, your husband needs to lose a lot of weight before we can do anything. And it was like, to me, I just felt like he didn't care. I just felt like, oh, no big deal. He's like, well, I'm going on vacation, and when I come back, then we'll revisit it. So I thought, okay, let me just weigh this out. Not my normal self, like, no, we need to get this done. And so we did that. But then when we went to the next appointment, it was still like a little lazy, if you will. And I felt like my husband's health was not as important to him as it was to me. And literally we changed his doctor and had additional tests ran. His PSA has skyrocketed, and he ended up having a surgery 30 days later. So just, I guess, to answer your question, is knowing when to ask those questions and knowing when to be a little bit persistent and when to back off a little bit. But for me, it was like, I would have liked to seen that individual care for the patient as much as the caregiver cares for them. And I get that that's not their family and that type of stuff, and they've got that certain doctor stuff going on. But in the same token, I just didn't feel like, just like Megan was saying, it just didn't seem important.
Let me piggyback on your story about changing doctors. My husband he, back in 2001, it was sort of early in the game for people to be having PSA checked. And he knew about it. And so he was having his checked. And he was suspicious that it was rising more than he wanted it to. And he had appointments and he had biopsies that didn't show anything. And he was told, go home and come back in a year. It's not going to grow that fast. And so at that point, the mindset seemed to be either you knew people who had that idea of, oh, it's just prostate cancer, it doesn't grow very fast, or they were diagnosed too late. And by the time it was found, they were with bone mets and there was no stopping it. And so you're caught between two extremes and neither of them is helping you. So it just happened. And I think for us, it was one of those life miracles you just are thankful for, that our insurance changed. And you'd hate to say that your life depends on your insurance, but when it changed, he had access to different doctors. And he went to one that he knew and liked because he'd worked with him. And that man did a biopsy and found the cancer. And like you said, Daphne, in 30 days, he had his surgery. And that was the gold standard at the time. It was get it out because you can see what you're dealing with. And in fact, it was the right choice for him. Not for everybody. And now you've got a bazillion other choices. It used to be even 10 years later, it was, well, you can have surgery or you can have radiation. And for a period of time, radiation was the gift that kept on giving. And did you in? But now everything is improved. The surgery's improved, the radiation's improved, the other kinds of treatments have improved, the scanning has improved. So there's nothing that we can change about when and where we had our decisions to make. But the hopeful thing is that organizations like Zero and others are on the cutting edge of helping get the funding and get the interest and the public information out there to keep finding the even better ways of diagnosing and then treating. So yeah, there's a lot that we just don't look back and have 20/20 hindsight saying wish we had, because it is what it is and we did what we did. But it's also very promising to have stayed in touch, which is another thing I should say. My husband is of the opinion that he will never say I am cancer free because he is a cancer scientist. So once you have identified that there's a cancer, there's a microscopic something somewhere, it's there. And so don't let your guard down. Keep having your PSA tested, keep having your annual or semi-annual appointments to stay ahead of that anything could present later on. And healthy 20 years. If I had known that at the outset, wow. I mean, you can't know ahead, but the promise is that there is a hope and a future.
Yeah, absolutely. Such a great point. I mean, I think you said it very well, and almost that once a patient, always a patient. And we know that early detection and early detection of recurrence, it sets you up for such a better prognosis. So such good tips. Megan, did you have another comment?
I was just going to say, piggybacking on switching doctors, I think it's important when switching doctors, because what happened was with my dad, and I don't think he'll mind me saying this, but he hadn't had a digital exam or, hadn't been screened in, I think, 10 years, because he had switched doctors and that one hadn't done one and the new one hadn't done one, and he didn't think to ask for one. And so by the time he had an exam, he went for a biopsy, I think the next day, and that's when they found it, and it was stage 4 with bone mets. So, it's just so important to just get screened. What do they say? Don't fear the finger, like everything like that. Just so important.
If I may, I was just going to piggyback on that as well. The doctor that my husband had at the beginning didn't do any testing. Like literally, we just sat in his office and talked to him. He didn't test him. He didn't even touch him. So that was alarming to me. But I was going to say something based on what Miss Kathy said about getting checked and having your PSA. My husband wasn't even getting his PSA checked. Like, it's not something that we even thought about. It's, you know, he was just having his regular checkups, and his PSA was high one year, and our doctor was like, oh, it's fine, we'll test it in another year. And luckily our primary doctor was on top of it and continued to check it, and that's what led us to where we were. But and not to be race conscious or whatever, but just going through this journey, what I have personally learned is, and what I know, just being an African-American person, it's like, oh, I don't want to go to the doctor. If I find out something wrong, it's like this bad thing or whatever. Now I have to deal with it. But just my own personal mission, not that we're talking about missions right now, but I just feel like it's very important to say, is everybody that I talk to, man or woman, is making sure that their significant others do get tested, for the simple fact we were not looking or even checking to see if his prostate was good, bad, or indifferent. It was solely because of our amazing primary doctor that he was doing his due diligence, but not everybody has that same story that they can catch it as early as we did. So I just wanted to share that, and I hope that's okay.
Oh, it's more than okay. Absolutely, Daphne. I'm so glad you did. I mean, I think it's a great, if you don't mind that I take the stage for 1 second. You know, Zero recently hired a vice president of health equity. And one of the many reasons that we made that move, I mean, the racial disparities and differences in outcomes among Black men versus white men are stark, and something has to be done. And there are a million reasons and factors, but trust in the healthcare population and in the research space between African Americans and treatment teams and researchers, it's there and it's real, and it's constantly needing to be addressed. And so I know I love that you mentioned that. I think it also speaks to just cultural differences among many populations. Those, you know, some cultures are completely used to having conversations about their health with their family, and some are simply not. So I'm so glad that you mentioned that, and we could talk for days and days about that, which we will in upcoming webinars and summits. So I'm so glad you mentioned that. It's very real, and it's on our radar at Zero. So let's talk a little bit about caregiver fatigue. We know caregiver fatigue and burnout it's a very real phenomenon. So share some ways that each of you are making sure that you're finding that healthy balance and trying to make sure the best that you can, that you're taking care of yourselves. Any tools or tips that you can share with our listeners?
Let me jump in.
I hope this silence doesn't mean that you're not taking care of yourselves.
I wanted to jump in and say, first of all, that the term caregiver may or may not actually fit each of us. It seems to be the term that's out there when you sign up for any organization that's helping people who are in this ballgame, but they're not the patient. You just kind of get clumped into the area called caregiver. But I've never really felt like what I would consider a caregiver to be. I'm a partner in this, co-conspirator maybe, to get ahead of it and to stay healthy and to change our diet and to make each day important. And so if I take care of me, and never mind a label, I just think you can call me a caregiver if you want, but that's, co-conspirator. I like that a lot better. Because we do conspire to do fun things together and to make every day count. And sometimes we take a weekend away in a cabin in a pretty autumnal place like I have in my picture. Or we just take a walk in the park across the street and watch the ducks. Or if he's too tired and napping, I go out and putter in the garden, or I'm also a musician. So sometimes music just lifts me into a place where everything else dissipates and I can restore my own soul. So I think keeping your own identity and not getting lost and sucked into being something that you're not, that you didn't want to be, that you don't have to be. Try to stay healthy for your own sense of well-being, and then that lifts everybody around you.
So again, coming at this from a little bit of a different perspective as a daughter versus a spouse, when I was asked to be part of this panel, I was like, I don't really consider myself a caregiver. I mean, I don't live with them, you know. But I am a family member, and I do help out with everything that goes into, like I mentioned, flying to Chicago and that kind of thing. So the role that I kind of have taken is I try to anticipate, because my mom is, I guess, the primary caregiver. She lives with him. So I try to anticipate what she might need from me. So if that's driving him to the airport so that she doesn't have to, or if that's picking him up from the airport, or we actually happen to work together, my mom and I. So if it's picking up extra things around the office, because I know she's making phone calls about medications. So I'm trying to lessen the load for them, having holidays at my house instead of their house, so they don't have to, planning our vacations, taking them away for the weekend, you know, that kind of thing. So making sure that she's taken care of, and so that she can take care of him. That's kind of become my role.
I think for me, it's literally just going to the gym, because that's my piece. And pretty much just keeping myself busy, because that's what I like to do. I like to work. I love the fact that she says she doesn't like the title caregiver, because we're really not caregivers. I mean, we would, or at least I would do it no matter what. And again, titles don't define what we do and who we are. But just having that one-on-one time together, doing nothing, gives me peace. You know, seeing that he's happy, and, you know, if he can sit on the couch and watch football all day long, because by trade he is an umpire and a football official, which he's not doing anymore. So having him be able to have that time gives me great peace. So I think just doing the things that maybe he hasn't been able to do for a long time, which is sitting down, taking a break, and relaxing, gives me great peace in my own being.
Yeah, so it's so funny that I don't know if you have access to the questions that are coming in, but we have gotten a couple of comments just so supportive of what the three of you have really said about, you know, I'm not really a caregiver, and it also doesn't define me. And we have actually a very interesting question that's a little bit of a deeper dive on this term. It's a little bit more specific to Daphne and Kathy, and those, maybe we start using the term care partner if we're caretaker. You know, it's definitely something that we all need to consider, and making sure that we're using the most appropriate and inclusive language that we possibly can. But I want to just take a moment to read this question. So this person is saying that he or she is a psychosocial researcher, and also a prostate cancer patient, specifically publish on ways to reduce the distress on prostate cancer couples. So the question is around the term caregiver, and just wondering if this term in this label feels like it implies the end of a sexual relationship, or an unequal relationship where you have to carry the major burden to keep your partnership strong. So really, you know, interesting question if anyone has thoughts.
I'll jump in on that. Partner. We've been partners all along. Once the prostate cancer was defined, I'm still the partner. And maybe what shifted, but it didn't shift just because I did something different. It's like together we decided, yes, we could change our diet. So we decided to not eat red meat again, ever. Well, on a special occasion, maybe, but in 20 years, we probably had 2 steaks because there are other things that are better. And I started out saying, oh, I've probably been poisoning you for 20 years. Well, then I had to get over that and say, no, from here on, we're both going to be more healthy. And we are, because we've gone to a Mediterranean grain-based diet, fresh fruits and vegetables, nothing prepackaged if we can help it. And so building up new ways of being together, to me, that's a partnership. So I would say we are co-equals, except that he has to deal with the physical parts of it. And I think another part of that is, okay, so it has nothing to do with the intimacy involved in our physical sexual relationship. That's still our partnership. And that changed as well, as you know, and that's probably the worst fear going into any of these treatments for men is, wow, you're going to take away my manhood? That's a real kick where it hurts. But that's a blow to the wife as well. I mean, there are all different ways that people get around that. Our personal feeling is that every urologist office or whoever deals with the prostate cancer patient early on needs to have on staff counseling or a card to hand out and say, you will want to consult with either just a couples counselor, possibly a sexual therapist. But there are things that we would have never had to talk about, except that now we have prostate cancer and these are issues that come up, and yes, you have to deal with them. And over 20 years, we've dealt with a lot of variations on the theme, because as we've had one treatment, he had surgery first, then a few years later, androgen deprivation therapy, called ADT sometimes. It means you get the Lupron shot and you get hot flashes, and you not only don't care that you're not having sex, as my husband said, I don't care that I don't care. So it's pretty horrendous for the relationship unless you recognize it, you talk about it, you seek help to get through it, and realize it's not the end of the road, it's just a bump in the road. And again, we're surfing over waves we did not ask to be on, but here we are.
I couldn't agree with you more. I know that when we were in our second doctor, who we love so much now, that takes amazing care of my husband, that was one of the things that he talked about in depth, actually. And, you know, when he looked at me and said, well, I know this is going to be a problem for you. And I said, listen, if I can have my husband for many, many, many more years to come, then I really just don't care about that. That's not what defines us as a couple. Of course, some people, that is the tell-all end-all, and that's perfectly fine. But for me personally, I wanted to have my husband. That's my best friend. That's the father of our 2 daughters. And I would rather have him than worry about that. But again, everybody's different. You touched on something about the red meat and the food and changing the food and stuff. I had read somewhere that, you know, sugar is like the worst thing in the world. My husband came home one day, I'd thrown away everything in the house that remotely had anything sugar in it. And he's like, what happened to all our food? And I said, I threw it away. It's like, well, you should have given it to the homeless people. And I'm like, it would probably never make it because you would hide it, which he still tries to, but he does get to have his steak every once in a blue moon. So actually he had it 2 days ago. So he was like happy as a camper. But I agree with you 100% about changing your diet. I'm asthmatic. Unfortunately, I've been hospitalized. My lungs almost collapsed, and I was in hospital for over 2 months. So not only has it helped my husband, but I've been on this journey anyway, and I just kind of just heighten it up a little bit, just because if we're walking in the same path, it's like you're not really doing anything different when you're changing the full diet. We've kind of turned ourselves to a plant-based diet as well. So just changing the lifestyle together, then it doesn't seem so detrimental to your partnership.
Great. Thank you all. We have so many questions. We're going to try to get to as many as we can in the next 9 minutes, but let's jump to this one. How do you move between the role of caregiver and spouse and daughter when these roles are so distinct? Do you have any tips or pieces of advice for how you kind of bounce between those two roles?
I don't think I bounce between the roles. I think I just move through the motions. Whatever needs to be done, I just do it. Or, of course, I have one daughter that lives here, but the other one lives in Colorado. So, just, talking to them, they're my support system because, of course, they want to know what's going on with their dad. But I don't really think I bounce between caregiver, partner, or what have you. It's just our way of life. We didn't choose cancer, it chose us. And we just kind of just added it into our daily routine, and we just continue to push forward. I think that if you kind of define how you're going to move differently, it could cause problems along the way, because you're like, okay, well, I'm your caregiver. Okay, well, now I'm your wife, or whomever you are at that point. But if you just kind of move down that path in that new walk of life, I think it's a smoother transition. That's just my personal opinion, of course.
I'll second that. I just think I show up as a total me, and I go in the direction that I'm called in that moment. And maybe it's to play the keyboard, or maybe it's to plant some flowers in the garden, and maybe it's to make some applesauce, or maybe it's to help my husband arrange some doctor's appointments and figure out if I get to go along, or, it's all part of the fuller life. And I can't really say that I divide it up in any other way.
Yeah, I'm always both. I'm always his daughter, and I'm always, going to be whatever he needs me to be. So if I go to Chicago to the appointments, then I'm, taking notes as a caregiver, but I'm also his daughter. So I'm asking questions like a daughter would, but, I'm offering to drive because his hip hurts, like it never turns off, either of them.
Yeah, I want to read to you one of the comments that's come in from Facebook. Having been a caregiver as well as now being a survivor myself, I have to say, being a caregiver is so much harder, or it was for me. Caregivers are angels on earth. They take a licking and keep on giving. We are getting a lot of these comments, so I just wanted to make sure that the three of you were able to hear at least a couple of them in our final few minutes together. Another one of our attendees said caregiver is the same as equals caring giver. One who the man can lean on, sharing the management of stress. So just another couple comments I wanted to share with you on how valued you are in this journey. We've gotten a lot of comments about second opinions coming in and how valuable they are, and so grateful that you have touched on the importance of asking for a second opinion and advocating for yourself, and how that can make such a huge difference in the lives of our loved ones. So let's see, we have another question that came in. Are there, if you're able to share some of the actual the lows that you've experienced. Kathy, you mentioned some with the hot flashes, and we talked a little bit about sexual health, but are there any other lows that you can share with this person who's asked the question?
Let me just say that over 20 years, it's been a roller coaster. So there are highs, there are lows, and I mean, that's life. So that showing up. I would say, and I can't speak as a man, but I have learned observing not just my husband, but men in our bigger support group that is not going live now, but it did for many years. Very difficult dealing with the side effects. And the two main ones are the incontinence and the erectile dysfunction. And I couldn't tell you which one was worse, because the incontinence, I mean, they both are tied up in a man's dignity and a man's sense of well-being and a man's sense of self, his masculinity. It's all at risk here. And it feels like you've lost control with that. And then double up on that when you start pumping the drugs or the androgen deprivation therapies, and now you're having hot flashes and you're growing boobs and your belly's kind of plumping out and you're trying to do exercise, but you're too tired. I mean, I don't want to paint a terrible picture here, but there's a lot that you put up with, but knowing that there's another side to that, that gets you where you need to be. So maybe you get the second opinion, or you find the doctor that's willing to give you the estrogen patch so that you don't have such hot flashes, or the doctor that encourages you to do the exercise so that you produce the endorphins in your brain that have been sucked out of you by the treatment. So yeah, I, as a woman who's gone through menopause and who's had the hot flashes and who knows sleep deprivation and all of that, I identify with and can have great sympathy for all that they go through, but it's not the end of the story. It's part of the story. And this is where I think support groups are really, really helpful, because when you find out, you can actually talk about it to somebody who understands what you're saying and doesn't mind if you cry, and men cry. I mean, it's okay to do that, and not in every realm, but in the support group, you're free to show those emotions, and sometimes anger is the emotion. My women's support group says to me, women can cry, men tend to get angry. It's their way of lashing out, and use the F word a whole lot at everything, not just at the cancer. So you're dealing with a deep emotional crisis here, but there again, counselors, please seek them out, because, or even a social worker. Sometimes the nurse practitioner is your best friend in the office, because she has time to sit with you and give you some deeper concern than maybe the doctor has time for. So, and then, yeah, I can't say enough to let you know that the support group, whether it's on Zoom or whether it's in person, lets you have access to the expertise of all these other people who may come as a prostate cancer partner, but they also come with whatever other expertise they are that might have been in counseling or in education or in science, or and it becomes a community where, gosh, you just feel like, if I had found this sooner, it just lifts you up and makes life livable.
One low that we, so hot flashes, yes, that happens. I remember when he told me about his hip pain and things, and I was like, okay, well, hip pain, you know, like, I don't know what kind of hip pain you're having, but I remember when he told me, like, I can't bend to cut my toenails, like those kind of things, like having those kind of moments where you're like, oh, okay, so then we need to figure out how that's going to happen. Coming from a therapy background, finding these adaptive things, like the long shoe horns to put your shoes on and your socks on, and like that kind of stuff, is really helpful. But yeah, I mean, that for some reason that stuck in my head as like a low point, because I remember being like, oh my gosh, it's cutting your toenails. You know, it seems like something that's so like easy to do, and realizing that was difficult for him was big.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you all. I am so sorry that we did not get to everyone's questions. Such great questions, such great comments, so many supportive comments rolling in. I think I didn't get to probably 12 questions and comments. So I apologize. I think Kathy, you said it best, as you mentioned when we started, or right before we pressed record and live, that The support group attendee today in one of Kathy's support groups said, "You only left an hour for this." So we recognize that we could have talked for a very, very long time. And I just want to share our gratefulness and our big thanks to Megan and Kathy and Daphne for being so open and vulnerable and honest and sharing your experiences with our attendees. So truly thank you. And thanks for all you do for the prostate cancer community and for your support groups and for your loved ones and for your community. We hope you know how important you are in this journey.
Glad to be here.
Thank you.
I think the big thank you goes to Zero for having this platform for us to be able to share with other individuals, because like myself, I didn't have this at the beginning. And now I can share with other people that may be going through this. This is what you should do. This is where you should go, so you can have that support that we're all getting here today. So it's a big thank you to Zero. So thank you guys so much for the platform.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all. I want to just lastly thank our attendees for spending your evening with us, spending the last hour with us. So please be sure to fill out the survey, our evaluation of our programs. We also ask for topics for the future that you want to hear about and how Zero can be that supportive resource and tool for you. Like you know, we hate that you are in this community, but we're glad you found us. So really grateful that you spent your night with us. Again, you'll receive the survey. The recording of this event will be posted on our website in the coming days. It'll also be found on our Facebook page and on our YouTube channel. Again, our website is zerocancer.org. And this recording will be up shortly, as well as all of the other recordings that we have and webinars that we've recorded and presentations from previous summits and other topics. So with that, I will be signing off, and I hope everyone has a wonderful evening and a safe week, and good night.
Good night.
Good night.